A spectacular game played by Stockfish and Lc0, Leela. I set these two engines to play each other in a 120-minute classical game, and the most brilliant chess was played. I will be explaining all of these moves in great depth and make it as entertaining as possible, so enjoy. And all of the variations were played with Stockfish and Leela as well. I'm going to skip to the end of the book move so we can get into the interesting part sooner. The game consisted of the Sicilian defense, Taimanov, Barstrikov with bishop e3 and a6, and that looks like e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4, c takes d4 and knight takes back, knight c6, knight c3, queen c7, bishop e3, a6, queen f3, knight e5, queen g3 and h5, the last book move. Now, only 8 moves into the game, things get very interesting. Stockfish played h4, stopping the h5 pawn from advancing to h4 whilst threatening the queen, but it is seen as a missed opportunity to punish Leela. Instead of h4, white should have played knight f5, sacrificing the knight. No human would ever play this absurd move, but engine chess is a different league and I'll explain why. When black takes the knight with the pawn used to defend the d5 square, but after taking the knight it no longer does that, and white can infiltrate by playing knight d5, attacking the queen. Leela moves their queen to b8, playing defensive, while Stockfish gives the blows. Stockfish plays bishop b6, putting pressure right around the queen and trying to asphyxiate Leela's queen. Black plays h4, trying to get the queen to move away from putting pressure on their knight on e5. Stockfish played queen to c3, and in fact this move is the best move. This move puts more pressure on the c7 square, trying to hem in Leela's queen. Black responds with knight to c6, blocking the queen's sight to the c7 square. Surprisingly, aside from all of this havoc, Stockfish castled, and indeed it is the best move. Leela responded with bishop to d6, defending the c7 square from the massive pressure from white. Stockfish took the hanging pawn, and Leela played the smart move, bishop e5, trying to remove Stockfish's queen from eyeing the c7 square. But Stockfish doesn't move their queen away, but white pins the bishop to the king by playing rook e1. Black played knight e7, blocking the pin from the rook, so now black can move their bishop without being under check. Now white's queen can be taken if they don't do anything about it, but Stockfish deals with this problem so brutally because Stockfish plays the brilliant move, rook takes e5, sacrificing the rook. Now Leela has 2 ways to take white's rook, with the knight or with the queen. If Leela takes the rook with the knight, it is a blunder, because the knight used to be on c6, stopping white's queen from eyeing the c7 square. Now the knight has moved, Stockfish wreaks havoc and obliterates Leela. Stockfish starts by playing bishop to c7, attacking both Leela's queen and knight. If black moves their queen out of the bishop's attack, it is practically game over for black. White takes the hanging knight with their queen, and with an unforgiving attack on black's king. Leela plays queen c5, desperately getting their queen back into action, but it's too late as white has already won. Stockfish plays f7, and Leela can't take because Stockfish plays knight takes f6 check, with a discovered attack on the queen, and it's mate in 11, and engines can easily follow through in these positions. So instead of taking the f7 pawn, Leela castles, hoping for safety, but regardless, white takes black's hanging knight with check, and another discovered attack happens on the hanging queen, and as a result of that, black has to take the knight for its queen, and the game is lost for black. So going back a few moves, we now know that Leela can't move their queen out of the way of the bishop's attack, so the best move to play is d6, giving up the queen, and black recaptures, and they trade knights. Stockfish plays f4, getting the knight to move out of the way so the queen can take g7. Stockfish is completely winning with 3 points up on material, and 5.8 points up on the evaluation bar. I told you we were going in depth. Also remember that these are variations I am showing you. These variations are the thought process behind the engine's moves in the whole game I am showing you in this video. So going back a few moves, we now know that taking the rook with the knight is a blunder, but instead, taking the rook with the queen is the best move. White takes the queen, and Leela recaptures with the knight. But now white forks the rook and king, Leela moves their king and white regains the rook back, and Leela evens the material by taking the hanging pawn on f5 with their knight on e7, but white is 1.1 up on the evaluation bar. So going all the way back to the beginning, this is why Stockfish should have sacrificed their knight. I told you that these engines are on another league than humans. So, back to the real game after Stockfish played h4 and Leela played b5, controlling the a and c4 squares, and also giving room for the bishop on c8 to develop. Stockfish castles queenside and black plays d6, an inaccuracy because the best move was b4, getting the knight to move from its post as it controlled the b and d5 squares and getting it to move to a4. After d6, Stockfish played a3 and Leela responded with knight to f6. Now, Stockfish played bishop g5, threatening the knight, and the idea is when the knight is taken, it damages black's pawn structure and black's kingside is exposed. But black plays the move rook b8, developing the rook and defending the pawn on b5. But Stockfish starts the attack and plays f4, now both Leela's knights are getting attacked and the position starts to get tricky. Leela moves their e-knight to g4, it's bad because the knight doesn't really accomplish anything, instead moving the knight back to d7 was better with potential to reroute to c5 and put a lot more useful pressure on white. Stockfish gives another blow and pushes their e-pawn, attacking the knight even further. Leela gives a counterattack by threatening the knight on c3. They both trade pawns twice, but the rook recapturing the b for pawn is a mistake. The best move is if the bishop on f8 takes, developing the bishop and allowing black to castle to safety, so rook takes b4 is a mistake. Now at this very moment the game-changing moment happens. The most extraordinary chess is played with such brutality beyond belief. In this position, Stockfish played knight d to b5, a stunning sacrifice. The knight can be taken two ways, and there are so many variations in this position, and I will go through them all so you don't have to. If Leela takes the knight with the pawn, which is the best move, white plays the killer move, pawn takes f6, sacrificing their queen. Leela takes the queen and Stockfish takes the g7 pawn, forking the rook and bishop and threatening promotion. Now you can't take the pawn with the bishop because Stockfish would finish Leela with rook d8 checkmate. So, Leela saw that white's bishop on g5 is a major problem, threatening checkmate constantly, and now Leela knows why Stockfish sacrificed their queen. Leela has to remove the bishop from the game or else it's fatal for black. Now, you would think that moving the queen to c7, defending the d8 square from checkmate is a good idea, but Stockfish would take the rook on h8 with the pawn and promote to a queen. Now Stockfish is completely winning in position and material. The queen and knight sacrifice gave Leela so much to handle that material wasn't even the question. Now we know that Leela can't save her queen and has to give it up by playing queen f4 or queen to e3, but it has the same desired effect, forcing Stockfish to take the queen, and white was being checked as well. Leela takes the dangerous pawn on g7 and Stockfish plays bishop to b5 check, and taking the bishop with the rook is the best move because if Leela doesn't and moves their king to any legal square, which is f8 or e7, then Stockfish plays the great move bishop d6 check, forking the king and the rook, and black loses the rook on the spot. So taking the knight with the rook is the best move because the rook was going to be lost anyway, and the rook might as well take a knight down with them. So, going all the way back to the knight sacrifice, we will now look at why the rook can't take, as the knight would take back, and when Leela recaptures the knight the same brutal moves happen as Stockfish sacrifices their queen yet again, and we follow the same procedure. When Leela takes the queen, Stockfish takes the pawn on b5 with check, and the only move for Leela is to block the check with the bishop. Stockfish takes the bishop with their bishop, and Leela's only move is king to d8. Now Stockfish plays the brutal move pawn takes g7 discovered check from the bishop, forcing a promotion to a queen for white, and Stockfish absolutely dominates the position and can easily win. So, going all the way back to the knight sacrifice, we know that this move is so brutal. Back to the real game where Leela ignored the knight sacrifice and took the pawn on e5, but Stockfish played knight to c7 check, Leela moves their king to e7. And now again you are about to witness another crushing move as Stockfish plays the killer move knight 7 to d5, another brilliant move. Now, Leela can take two ways. Taking with the queen is obviously bad because you lose the queen on the spot to knight takes d5 check. So the best way to take the knight is with the pawn. Stockfish takes back with the knight, checking the king, and Leela moves their king to e6, getting rid of the pin of the knight from their king. But Stockfish plays knight f for check, a great move, and you'll see why. Black's king goes back to e7 and white pins the queen to the king by playing rook e1. Black places their rook between the rook and the queen by moving it to e4, and Stockfish plays bishop to d3, putting pressure on the rook. Leela moves their rook to e3, getting out of the danger, but Stockfish plays the beautiful move, knight to g6 check, with a discovered attack on the queen. The queens are traded, but white is winning as they play knight to f7 check, forking the king and the rook. White wins the rook and Leela plays knight to f2, now trying to give the shots. Stockfish moves their h-rook to f1, and black trades their knight on f2 for the bishop on d3. Now Leela plays bishop to b4, threatening the rook. White moves their rook to e2 and black plays bishop g4, playing aggressive and threatening the rook on e2 once again. Stockfish plays rook c2, getting out of danger while checking the king. Stockfish then takes Leela's knight on f6 for their bishop, and white plays knight to g6, getting their knight back into the game. Leela takes the hanging pawn on d3, and Stockfish plays knight to f4, threatening the rook. Leela moves their rook to d6, and Stockfish plays another brilliant move, knight takes h5, winning a pawn. Leela takes the knight with their bishop, and Stockfish plays rook f5 check, forking the king and bishop, and will win back the 3-point minor piece. Leela moves their king to a4, and Stockfish takes the hanging bishop. Now Leela moves their king to b3, looking for some checkmate ideas by hopefully getting their rook on the first rank, but Stockfish intercepts by playing rook f3 check, getting the king to move away to a4. Now Stockfish takes the hanging pawn on f6, and black moves their king to b3, back for some checkmate ideas. Stockfish crushes Leela's idea again by forcing the king to move away yet again by playing rook f3 check, and the king goes back to a4, and Stockfish moves their king to b1. Leela plays a5, trying to gang up on the somewhat lonely king, and Stockfish plays king a2, creating a defense so black can't infiltrate, and threatens checkmate on the next move with rook a3. Leela plays bishop d2, freeing the b4 square for the king. Stockfish plays rook a3 check, and Leela is forced to play king to b4, and Stockfish takes the hanging pawn with their h-rook on a5. Leela plays king c4, revealing an attack on the a5 rook. Stockfish moves their threatened rook to a for checking the king. Leela blocks with the bishop, and Stockfish moves their rook to b3, putting immense pressure on Leela's bishop. Now Stockfish trades all of the pieces, and the h-pawn can queen safely and win the game. This was an amazing game, and the thought process behind all of these engines is spectacular. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Also, the game's PGN is in the description if you want to look at the game yourself. Chesskedia out.